All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I'm doing something a little bit different today, so I'm hoping we don't have any glitches. We tend to have glitches whenever I do anything differently, and often for months thereafter. But what I'm doing is I'm actually live streaming not just on YouTube at Halitics, but also on Facebook. And if you're checking me out on Facebook because it popped up in your feed and you're like, oh, that looks interesting, let's see how Hal's doing, and you like it, what I'm going to ask you to do is go to the YouTube channel at some point and subscribe, because my goal, is to build that YouTube channel. But I also, of course, want to reach as many folks as possible. And so being on different platforms is a important way to do that. And I'm looking to also get on Twitter as well. It's not really that difficult to do. I figured out free way to do this, and I want to give a big shout out to Hop, who helped me with some great suggestions. Hopefully they'll lead to a better streaming experience for you and a bigger audience for me. And of course, the two of those go hand in hand. So I asked a question for today's program. It's not going to be the entire program whatsoever. We'll probably even spend more than half of it, if that much, on what you see in front of you. That question: are those two men, Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, worst justices ever? And I'll answer it right now. I'm going to just put a picture up on the screen of the obvious answer. No, they're not. I mean, it's sort of a clickbait, right? Worst ever. But this guy has got to be the worst. That's Roger Taney. And he was the Chief Justice and author of the infamous Dred Scott decision, which held that an emancipated, formerly enslaved person, Dred Scott, had no rights to sue for his freedom. He had been stolen back to Missouri, where his enslaver resided. And when he sued for his freedom, under the laws of the state of Illinois, Justice Taney ruled that he had no standing whatsoever as an African American and former or currently enslaved person. So nothing Alito and Thomas have done is in that league. Now, were they justices, before the Civil War? Who knows what they would have done? I mean, people have, what did Churchill say? Some are born great, some achieve greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them. And you can go the other way too. Some are born awful, some, become awful, and some have horrible awfulness thrust upon them. So, a lot of it is your circumstances. In our moment, these two justices have consistently championed corporate interests. They have demonstrated a remarkable level of corruption. And also, at least with regard to Alito, you don't really see this with Thomas as much. But with Alito, the temperament is so bad. And I'm not like a big believer in stuff like temperament. People mock Trump because he is such a lout. He's so crude. And yeah, he's an embarrassment. I mean, there's no question. It's not good. It's not what you want in a president. Of course, I'd much rather have a cool, calm, collected, elegant, gentlemanly Barack Obama type as president than a loud, boorish, crude buffoon like Trump. That's not even close. That's important. But in the end, it's what they do in office. It's policy that matters. LBJ was a, pretty crude person. Apparently, he would entertain reporters while he was sitting on the toilet. This was a guy who, he wouldn't have fit in decent society, if you want to use that term, but he signed the civil rights laws. He was the author of the Great Society. He did a lot of really, really good things. And I know Vietnam, he escalated there, and I've discussed why I give him not a complete pass, but I've always felt that LBJ was in a position, and this is not just based on feeling, but from reading, from what other, contemporaries of his like McGeorge Bundy said, the Democratic hawks, the Scoop Jacksons of the world, basically told him you can get civil rights or you can get out of Vietnam, but you can't have both. And he chose civil rights. So I can't say that was the wrong decision. Now, maybe he could have betrayed them, but he was already escalating by the time the civil rights bills came before Congress and up for a vote. So I understand why he felt that he had no choice in that matter if he wanted civil rights laws to pass. And he did. He really did. So, this is a man who was in many ways one of our greatest presidents. And he didn't have, an elegant demeanor about him. He wasn't a Barack Obama in that regard. He cheated on his wife. He wasn't a good family man the way, by all accounts, Barack Obama and, for that matter, George W. Bush both are. But does it really matter? I mean, what matters is the legislation they sign, the bills they pass, the wars they do or don't start or get us in or out of. But the temperament is an issue. These guys are, they're especially Alito. I shouldn't say that about Thomas. They're very problematic. So here is, and what really brought this to my attention while I'm talking about this is, we'll play this clip from a while ago, but the story that's in the news right now about Alito is that the upside down resistance, whatever, stop the steal flag or symbol. It's not a flag, it's an American flag, but during the January 6th insurrection and its aftermath, the Alitos flew an American flag. This is when he was a justice. This wasn't, before he became a justice. And we'll talk about why that matters in a moment. And by the way, if you want to call me, 240-242-5646 at any point. It is the free-for-all, though I didn't call it that today, but it is, as all Fridays are, a free-for-all. So please call in. It was great to hear from Rando yesterday. Also be responding to some criticism I received in an email later in the program. But what really triggered this discussion of Alito and Thomas to begin today's program was the report that Alito flew that, or the Alitos, I should say, flew an upside-down flag showing support for solidarity with the quote, stop the steal movement. The claim, the clearly false from the get-go claim. Even, I think, look, the Russiagate was a terrible hoax. It was clearly, we know it was bogus. Came up, it started with that ridiculous dossier and all that was fabricated by Steele working for the Clintons. But as bad as it was, it's not as, obviously, clearly BS as the stop the steal. I mean, there was just simply nothing to support it. The claim that somehow Trump really won and there were votes that were hidden, and Republican officials, state officials, said this is ridiculous. There's zero evidence adduced at any point. I mean, let's face it, there were connections between the Trump campaign and Russia. They did meet with some Russians. Trump did say, hey, if you're going to rig it, go ahead, be my guest, right? I mean, that's who he is. But, he threw a little gasoline on that fire. But there was nothing to justify January 6th or Trump's efforts to rig the count, right, in his favor. That was just a steal. That was a grab. The steal was the attempt by Trump and his minions to maintain power wholly undemocratically. And yet the Alito family supported, when he was justice, during the period of time when he was justice, they supported that. Here's Alito back in 2013, Obama speaking to Congress.
Last week, the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend.
All right, I'm going to stop. I'm going to just want to blow this up because you can kind of see Alito, and he got a lot of, bad attention for this because, he mouths, people think you lie. And it kind of looks like he is when Obama's saying, hey, this court, led by Alito with Roberts as the Chief Justice, you said, hey, go ahead. There's campaign finance laws are basically out the window. There's no more of those. And it was an awful, totally undemocratic decision that very likely was driven, at least in part, by the corruption that has permeated the court, and with specific reference to Alito and Thomas, taking incredible sums of money valued at millions and millions of dollars from donors. There you can see Alito kind of opening his mouth. Let me just reboot this. You can sort of see it as Obama's speaking. And Alito's in the second row there. He's next to Sotomayor, far left.
To spend without limit in our election.
Yeah, so he's mouthing spend without limit. So I'll play it one more
including foreign corporations. To spend without limit in our election.
So it's really a bad look. It's no class, and as bad as that is, and it's bad, the real issue is ultimately the decision making. I mean, he just shows remarkably poor jurisprudence, and jurisprudence that I'm not going to defend any bad decision, but at least if the decision is on the side of poor, struggling, and working people, against the powerful, the rich, the elites, the law may say one thing, but your view is, well, we have to champion the little guy. Okay, I give you you're entitled to much more of a pass, in my view, than when you are, as Alito does, as Thomas does, take every single opportunity to put the interests of the rich, the powerful, your donors, your financiers, your benefactors first. It's just awful. And that's why we ask the question, are these two of the worst justices ever? And, arguably the worst since, I don't know if I would say since Taney. I mean, I think Taney, it's going to be pretty hard to break his record to be the worst justice. Just like when people say Trump's the worst justice, or the worst president, rather. Andrew Jackson was genocidal maniac, right? I mean, he just totally cleared out Georgia and Florida. He ethnically cleansed Georgia and Florida of the Cherokee people. He was an enslaver to very, very, hundreds and hundreds of human beings. He kept in bondage. I mean, look, again, if Thomas or Alito had the power to do something like that to their fellow human beings, would they? I don't know. Maybe they would. Some are born terrible, some achieve terribleness, and some have terribleness thrust upon them. Doesn't look like Alito and Thomas have had the opportunity to be that bad. But again, if maybe we have people who would be Hitler if they could be, but if they're not, then they're not Hitler. You have to actually do, mass murder. You have to be a Bibi to be as bad as Bibi. You have to do those things. You can't just want to do them or wish you could do them or do them if you could do them. No, you have to actually do them to be that bad. Comparing justices, Rehnquist was a bad justice. He was Nixon's pick, and I think, was it Reagan who made him? Yeah, Reagan made him Chief Justice. And one of the worst things that William Rehnquist did was before he was a justice, when I think he was either in law school or he was just out of law school. He was down in Arizona, which is home state, and he was, trying to keep black people from voting. He was, I believe, an associate attorney at that point at a law firm that was working for Republican or right-wing candidates, maybe Barry Goldwater at that point, and he was doing what he could to keep African Americans, to intimidate them, to keep them from voting. That's really awful. I mean, I don't know where to go with that. But he wasn't a justice at the time. So I look at what people do in office before I look at what they did before they took office. And, again, Rehnquist was a bad justice. I don't like his decisions. I don't think we saw the kind of, remarkably poor temperament or corruption in Rehnquist as we have seen in Thomas and Alito. There's a video I want to show. That we can get to that issue of the flag, the upside down flag. And by the way, do subscribe. And again, if you're on Facebook, if you're checking me out on Facebook because I popped up in your feed and you're saying, oh, this is kind of interesting, what I ask you to do is go to my YouTube page at Halitics. You can see the spelling right there, and subscribe. And also, by the way, call in, right? I mean, you can call in. You don't have to be watching on YouTube to call in. You can be watching anywhere as long as I'm live. This was from today. This is the excuse that the Justice Alito made for that flag. I don't know if it's called he's not really even, is he making an excuse? It doesn't sound like there's any apology, but it's interesting. I didn't really want to spend, a ton of time with the CNN analysis or anything like that. So today, NBC Today did a pretty decent job. A short video. Here we go.
Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito is responding this morning to a report in the New York Times that in 2021, he had an American flag hanging upside down outside of his home. So according to the report, this was the photo taken on January 17th, 2021. The upside down flag was a symbol associated.
It's sort of interesting that this is just coming out now. I find that really interesting that, this was back in 3+ years ago. And I don't know that anyone's brought this to anyone's attention until now. It's kind of curious, right? I mean, I'm fine with it. I don't think there's a problem with it being discussed. This is perfectly relevant. We should know about it. But again, why now? What's the I don't know, the catalyst? Who decided to share this, and why at this point? Have the news stories, this was reported, I think, first in the New York Times, I believe, could be wrong. What generated that story? I'm really, really curious. I don't know if we'll ever find out. Maybe just someone sent it into the paper, maybe a neighbor. I don't know.
With former President Trump's false claims of election fraud during the January.
Every time now they mention the allegation by Trump, the contention that he lost because of some sort of fraud by Biden and the Democrats. The media always uses the word false claims, or debunked claims, or something of that sort. And I'm of mixed feelings, right? I mean, a news report should tell you what happened. It should tell you the facts. When they say false or debunked, they're clearly putting their finger on the scale and saying, this guy's lying. And it's true, right? He is lying. He's, psychotic. There's clearly something wrong with Trump. I mean, we know that. Just his behavior at the trial in Manhattan, which, by the way, apparently is going pretty well for him. So Cohen's testimony, Michael Cohen, the fixer, at first was viewed as a real killer for Trump, but he was apparently very effective. I haven't followed this too closely, but just the story I read, and watch on a little bit of CNN, which of course is all against Trump, and a CNN panel led by Anderson Cooper, really went over the cross-examination and argued that Cohen was very, very seriously, his credibility which was always in question, right? I mean, the guy's an admitted liar on many occasions. His credibility was, in terms of even what he said to the jury, was really, really seriously compromised, including, according to Cooper, and I didn't look into this closely, his acknowledgement, his admission that he had lied at one point in the trial, the Stormy Daniels trial. He lied at one point, but then later on, I'm telling the truth now, but I was lying then, or I got it wrong then, something of that nature. So at least according to CNN, there's a good shot Trump will skate. Will skate. And when you think about it, even there, you're of two minds. Because, of course he must have. He wanted her to, he didn't want that story published. Why would he? I don't think it would have necessarily tanked his presidential ambitions, but it might have. So, of course he did that. On the other hand, it's kind of a ticky-tacky case. It's, doesn't really, seems like it's kind of more partisan and politically motivated than would otherwise be, because the Justice Department didn't bring it, and it's being used in a state court against, Trump on state charges that seem kind of a little bit of a stretch. So, in any event, Trump's clearly got really serious issues. And for Alito to fly that flag, or the Alitos, I don't want my Supreme Court justices to be irrational or whatever they are.
January 6th attack at the Capitol, dozens of rioters were carrying similarly inverted flags. So in a statement to the Times, Alito said this: "I had no involvement whatsoever in the flying of the flag. It was briefly placed by Mrs. Alito in response to a neighbor's use of objectionable and personally insulting language on yard signs." The Times report is raising concerns about Alito's impartiality as the Supreme Court considers two major cases related to the January 6th attack.
And well, they should,
concerns about Alito's impartiality.
I'm just going to go back, and I want to get to a spot in there. I want to leave it on the screen. But of course they should. Of course they should question his credibility, his impartiality. If he was, or his family, his wife is out there saying, "Oh yeah, stop the steal. Clearly Trump, Trump lost the election. What he was doing was just trying to maintain the democracy since he really should be president." That's clearly a problem, right? How can Alito be impartial when ruling? Now, I'm not saying you have to believe beforehand that Trump is lying, but if you are on the record, or your spouse is, your house is on the record, that the November election in 2020 was a theft of Trump's win, his right to be president, I don't see how you can be impartial when you're ruling on the charges of incitement to riot and the charge of, violating election laws, committing fraud under RICO statutes. You can't be. So this is a big issue. And of course, he's not going to recuse himself. And it's also like, okay, it's okay. We get to, I want to say, find that exact spot. But okay, the argument is, well, the reason first of all, I didn't do it. It was my wife. Yeah, our spouses do things that we don't always know about. But, Justice Thomas is rightly chided for ruling on cases involving organizations that his wife, Ginny Thomas, is part of, has been a leader in. This isn't quite the same thing, but it's pretty close. I wouldn't necessarily, say, okay, this is the most awful thing that ever happened. I want to be really honest about this. Why? my problem with Alito, even worse than this, is just his judgment in case after case, whether it was, Bush v. Was he? Yeah, no, he wasn't justice then, but he's not. He's on the side of the rich and powerful. He's corrupt, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But yeah, let me just show this real quick. I had no involvement whatsoever in the flying the flag. It was briefly placed. So, objectionable and personally insulting language. So were they insulting you? If they were insulting you, just go ask them to take it down. I can't believe they were insulting you personally. But what? Again, the temperament, the judicial, demeanor is so wrong-headed here. We didn't like that they were criticizing Trump. Probably they had some sort of anti-Trump sign, I'm assuming, on their lawn. So we're going to fly our flag upside down? Come on. We deserve better on the Supreme Court. Let's get to the corruption issues. And I was talking more about Alito. We'll just show, let's just start with this. ProPublica has revealed undeclared links to Harlan Crow, who's a big-time billionaire developer who's apparently close friends with Thomas, takes him on very, very expensive vacations, lends him his house, his car. Apparently, they go out on the yacht. So inappropriate. Crow is a very politically connected guy. His conservative organizations are often amicus curiae on various Supreme Court cases. And he's also mirrored by another billionaire, Paul Singer, another right-wing extremist billionaire. I think Singer is a finance guy, maybe I'm wrong, who's kind of bought his own justice, Alito. And Politico had a good piece on this by Corey Robin. I was kind of surprised that I wouldn't say my good friend Corey Robin, guy I really respect. The question that he asked, I think back in 23, as soon as the story broke that Thomas had for decades been taking expensive vacations with billionaire Harlan Crow, critics and conservative defenders huddled, had he sold his votes? And I think Robin makes the point it's really, A, not that simple, and B, it doesn't have to be, so clear cut. It just looks awful. It just sends the message that you're on the side of the billionaire class and you're taking their money. And it's just that simple. So, there's ProPublica. His approach to ethics has already attracted public attention. Last year, Thompson recused himself from cases involving his wife, Jenny. So these are just clearly folks who shouldn't be on the court. From our friend Corey Robin in Politico, Chris Murphy, a Democrat, noted in a tweet that Thomas, in 8 different cases, sided with Crow's group, right-wing group. And they're saying, well, that's not such a surprise because 4 of those were unanimous and the other 4, the other conservatives joined. Again, the appearance is so bad. And who can argue? How can we say the money didn't make an impact? The gifts didn't. We don't live in a democracy, is the simple answer. And these 2 justices, more than any others, reflect that fact. They're completely tied into the corporate establishment, corporate elites. They reflect it more than any others. More even than Scalia. I mean, Scalia, his decisions were awful, but he didn't, as far as I can tell, enrich himself personally. Certainly not to the degree that these 2 have. Can't really put this on Trump. Trump did not appoint either of those 2 to the court. Trump's first two justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, are certainly solidly in the conservative wing, but not the hard right extremist right wing of that court. Coney Barrett, bad, problematic, not a fan. That's an argument, which we're going to get into in a little bit, for holding your nose and voting for Biden, not going third, fourth, fifth party like me, going for the Green Party candidate. It's not good enough for me, but maybe some will think it is. Maybe some will think it is. All right, let's get to where I am in terms of the best way. How do we try to work with people, but also my thoughts on why we're in such a bad spot. Look, Trump, very problematic. Biden, very problematic. These are not good choices. We don't have good options. I think what happens is people get very, very set in their ways that the other guy is the worst. So because the other guy is the worst, the guy facing him can't be that bad. In fact, he must be really good at some point. So I saw a post on Halitics on Facebook saying how Trump really was so much better than Biden. And I was really kind of taken aback because no, he's not. He wasn't. Yeah, I'll accept that when it comes to Ukraine, but that's the only place. When it comes to, and maybe trade, did Trump Jerusalem the recognized capital of Israel by the United States. Moved our embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. It was a terrible, terrible mistake. It really amped up to a degree I wouldn't have thought. Tensions. Jerusalem should be a divided city. It's holy to Muslims, Christians, and Jews. It should be, and we should have pushed for it to be an international city, not a city that is recognized by us as Israeli. Trump moved the embassy there. He signaled that the United States, at least under his administration, was all in for Israel. It's a very bad thing to do. And it's something that Biden did not reverse. He should have, but he didn't. Trump's policy towards immigrants, breaking up families. I mean, I would call that absolutely cruel and inhuman punishment. I would call that sadistic. I would say that was one of the absolute worst things he did. He massively increased the federal debt and the budget deficit. It's not really talked about a lot. Republicans never bring it up. The fact is, his tax cuts were fiscally disastrous. Trump should not be president, should not have been president. And if it weren't for the Democratic embrace, the Democratic elite and corporate and media elites embrace of two really bad candidates, arguably as bad as he, and Hillary Clinton, and now Joe Biden, he never would have gotten a sniff of the White House, and he wouldn't have any chance to get back to it. And that's my view. So that's why I said, if you care, don't insult each other, don't attack each other, present the facts, present the evidence. And saying, Trump's the worst president ever, or saying he's great, he was much better, things were much better under Trump, both of those don't reflect the reality. Those are just arguments. Those are just statements, bald assertions without a real foundation, and they're not going to help us get where we need to get. I want to show you, I was really taken by this interview. Not really an interview, this conversation. I know, speaking of Arlen's kind of a fan of Glenn Greenwald. And wait a sec. Oh, stop it, Hal. Nope, take it back. Think about Glenn Greenwald. I'm a fan of Glenn Greenwald. Arlen's a fan, I don't get it, of Bill Maher. And so let's get a video up here of Bill Maher. This is an old one. credit to, hat tip to, however you want to call it, Brianna Joy Gray, because I saw this on her program just yesterday. I think it was just released yesterday. It wasn't just on yesterday. It was released yesterday. So you'll see several people, including Joy Reid. This is 2013, so she and Greenwald are going to look a little bit younger than they do today. If you've seen them recently on TV or elsewhere, but it's mostly going to be Greenwald and Maher, and both of them are, they're stepping over the other guests, which is kind of rude, and I don't love it, but it's a real interesting discussion, and I'm going to stop it in points because I think it, as brilliantly, as well as Greenwald made the points, as badly as he embarrassed Bill Maher, which I love, right? I mean, Maher deserves it. He's arrogant, he's snarky, he's sarcastic, he's dismissive. He's a nasty guy, is Bill Maher. As much as I love how Glenn Greenwald owned him, I think there was one place where he could have handled things even better. And it goes to my argument of how we should discuss issues, how we should debate issues, how we can possibly reach those who have different views.
Also imperfect revolution. No, but I agree with Bill. No, whenever the U.S. goes in and tries to impose our vision of democracy in that region, we fail.
No. Right, so she's saying, I want to just stop because it's really interesting. What Joy Reid is saying is, I'm agreeing with Bill. She's characterizing his view, which, according to her, is that when the U.S. tries to impose democracy on other countries, like in this case, they're talking about Egypt and other countries in the Middle East, Iran, that when we do that, we fail. That's how which I agree with her, by the way, 100%. And where I have a problem with her is where I have a problem with this argument is we're not even really trying to impose democracy. That's not the case. We're trying to impose American hegemony, American empire, for the profits, the benefits of the corporate elites and the military elites. So the idea, PNAC, Project for a New American Century, we're gonna impose democracy around the world. I believe in democracy. We should be promoting democracy. But George W. Bush, Hillary Clinton, those who embrace it, Victoria Nuland, they don't care about democracy. They don't want democracy at all. They want corporate hegemony. So, as far as it goes, it would be nice if we were trying to impose democracy, and maybe, if we were doing it in a peaceful way and, with carrots and sticks, but not violently, that would be a great thing. But Reid is saying our efforts, whatever you want to call them, have met with abject failure. And you'll hear more. He doesn't like that at all. That's not his view, as he'll let you know.
See, in that region, we failed. We took Mossadegh out in Iran, and we ended up with the Shah, and then we ended up with.
But that's not our fault. It's not our.
So he's saying it's not our fault. He's saying, oh, we did all these things, and we were trying to. How the hell is it not our fault? Of course, it's our fault. But again, he's pushing back on that claim by Reid that we failed. He's wrong.
Fault what came out. We didn't go into Egypt.
Well, we
wound up with the Muslim Brotherhood.
We didn't go into Egypt. We were supporting and propping up Mubarak for 30 years, even as we were cheering for all the Tahrir Square demonstrators as though we were on their side. It was our government that kept Mubarak in power, just like we've done across the entire Muslim world. And it's amazing for you to say that, well, look at all these Muslims. The minute you give them a little bit of freedom, they go wild and they start being all violent. How can you be a citizen of the United States, the country that has generated more violence and militarism in the world over the last 5 or 6 decades, and say, look at those people over there, they are incredibly violent?
All right, so it's great what he's saying. He's 100% right. This is a big reason why we shouldn't be in Ukraine also, why we shouldn't be fighting this proxy war with Russia, because we have no moral authority to claim that we're somehow better than Russia, or that our proxy state, Ukraine, is somehow morally superior to Russia. Would I rather live in Ukraine? Yes. But do I believe we have some sort of argument that we get to decide who's better? No. Our decision making has been consistently anti-person, poor, anti-working class, citizen of the countries where we involve ourselves.
We play a significant role in what has been happening in the Middle East because we've been interfering and dominating that region in order to have access to the oil.
I wasn't talking about violence. I was talking about theocracy.
All right, so now he tries to like move the goalposts. Well, I wasn't talking about the violence. We're violent too, I guess is what he's saying. But they're theocrats. Their states are based on religion. Like Israel's isn't. Like you don't have a right wing in this country insisting that the United States is a Christian nation. I mean, however Maher tries to characterize this, he loses. He's wrong. He's just flat out wrong. But anyway, he shifts the goalpost and says, oh no, it's not about the violence that we've committed. It's that these countries, like Egypt under the Muslim Brotherhood or Iran under the Shah, and the mullahs is a theocratic state, it's a Muslim state, and we're not like that. So, okay, all right.
That doesn't happen here.
No, well, okay, that doesn't happen here, but at the same time, Iran isn't invading lots of other countries and occupying them for a decade, nor are fundamentalist Muslim countries the way the United States is. So these things are interlinked because we are continuously interfering in that part of the world. And so to say...
Really, it's all our fault?
It's not...
So he just says, oh, you're saying it's all our fault? Total, straw person argument. No, that's not Greenwald's point. His point is what we've done is a huge part of the problem, and we need to stop doing it. And it's interesting because Maher can never acknowledge error, so he tries to push Greenwald into an extreme box. Oh, you're just saying everything that happens that goes wrong is us. The problem is Maher is the one with the utterly extreme viewpoint where he will never acknowledge that anything we've done is wrong.
All our fault, but when you send your military for 6 straight decades into other countries to bomb them, kill their children and women and innocent men, prop up dictators, you take responsibility for your actions and say, to the extent that that region...
That religion goes back 1,000 years before our revolution, so I don't think we can take all the blame.
All right, so he should say right there, so this is, again, Maher going back, and Greenwald just said, well, we shouldn't take all the blame, we should take a lot of it. So Maher's like, oh no, you're saying we should take all the blame. This was a great opportunity where I would have, I'm not saying I would have had that quick-wittedness, and I'm slowing down a little bit. I don't think I'm as sharp as I used to be perfectly frank, as I age. But if I had that opportunity, what I hope I would have said to Bill Maher then is, okay, I've already said I don't think that the United States is 100% to blame for what's happening in the Middle East. Do you think we bear any responsibility for it? Have we done anything wrong? That's how I would have responded. And I think he would have had to admit at that point, well, I think some of our policies maybe were a little bit misguided. If he had said that, I would have said, which ones? What should we be doing differently? Let's try to come up with some solutions, because what we've been doing obviously isn't working. We turned Libya into a terrorist training zone, into a slave trading country. We hollowed out Iraq so that Iran now has great control over over the Levant. Israel is now, an apartheid state. So since you've just stated that the United States is at least somewhat responsible, Bill, what should we be doing differently? That's the question I would have loved for Glenn Greenwald to ask Maher.
I think we should. I think we should take a lot of it. And there's lots of bodies and corpses that have been piled up in the name of Christianity and Judaism as well.
All right, let's play the end of it, because Maher just keeps digging himself into a deeper and deeper hole.
Recently.
Have you heard of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza for the last...
Because Maher said, oh no, we haven't killed a lot of people lately. The West isn't responsible. Theocracy isn't responsible on our end. The religion, Western religion, Christianity, Judaism, they're not responsible for recent deaths in the Middle East. It's all Muslim. Muslims. It's all Islam.
50 years motivated in part by extremist views of Judaism, or the wars in Europe, or the fact that there were generals in the United States saying we have to go and invade and destroy Iraq, a country of 26 million people, because our God is bigger. Lots of religions, not just Islam, produce violence.
Well, if I could just make one quick point about Egypt.
That silly liberal.
All right, so that sort of was annoying, right? Like Joy tries to get in, Joy Ann Reid. And, I'm not a big fan of her. To be honest with you, although she's said some good things lately, the right things about Israel-Palestine, which is good. She said, oh my God, another war recently. The truth kind of snuck out on her program. So good for her. It's just the two guys butting heads. And it would have been nice if they let Reid in for a moment. But they don't.
View that all religions are alike because it makes you feel good.
No, it makes.
So he's saying, oh, you're just taking this view that all religions are alike because that makes you feel good. So it's a complete nonsense. It's absurd. And Greenwald correctly throws it right back at Maher.
You feel good to say our side is better than people over there are
feel good
primitive
to
and
put
violent.
a crown on your head and say, I'm a good person.
So now he's just making it personal. It makes you feel good. I would have said, again, turn it right back on Maher. Ask him specific questions. Why is it so important for you to demonize Islam? We've just been through this. We've just shown how Israeli Jews are doing horrible things in the West Bank and Gaza. We've just shown how American Christian generals use Christian rock to get their troops excited to go kill in Iraq. No one's saying that they're all identical. No one's saying that Islam equals Judaism equals Christianity. They're different, but there are similarities in the way people use those religions to justify slaughter, to justify imposing their will on others. Isn't that right? And just ask it just like that, put him on the spot. Now, he's very slippery. He's very quick-witted. He's glib, so it'd be hard to do, but Greenwald's right there with him.
You get to ignore the responsibility that your own government has for the violence and instability in the world by saying, look, it's that primitive religion over there that's to blame.
All right, it's time for our desk bit.
And now he moves it. It would have been great. Now he just moves on, but it would have been ideal. It would have been lovely, again, if he had just put it back on him a little bit more. It just, isn't that right? Aren't you demonizing Islam, even though there are, hundreds of millions of peaceful Muslims who are in fact victims both of their own violent leaders, violent military, and also of violent Christians and Jews. Why? It would have been lovely, but hey, it's really hard to do that so quickly. And it was on balance a pretty good exchange in the sense that Maher was for a moment embarrassed and put on his heels, as he well should have been. All right, 240-242-5646. Got a few more minutes. Do want to let folks know I am not planning to broadcast Monday. I am going to New York right after this program, and I will be canvassing there, collecting signatures, if you will, to put Jill Stein on the ballot. Because both candidates are terrible. Both of our options are awful. And that's my response to PT, who sent this email to me, and I want to respond. So he writes, given that Trump now is proposing to sell out the environment, do you still think it's okay to encourage listeners in swing states to throw away their vote on third-party candidates who at best can only act as a spoiler? Biden is clearly the lesser evil. So there's a whole bunch to this, and what kind of drove this post was a report that Trump very brazenly, blatantly, and I'll just put it on the screen. I'm not going to read it, but I'll just put what PT shared with me, which is 100% correct, by the way. There's nothing, he's right. Brazenly asking these oil executives to give him money, and he'll roll back regulations. It's really bad, right? I mean, I'm certainly willing to, consider the argument that Biden is indeed the lesser of evils. And certainly, when it comes to Israel, he probably is too. But at some point, and I'm not one of those people who say, well, it's, if you vote for the lesser of two evils, you're still voting for evil. I mean, that is true from a, semantic viewpoint, but evil isn't all evil, doesn't equal evil. Some evils are far worse, far more harder, far more destructive and far harder to recover from. But we're at a point right now where our planet is, in fact, our biosphere is, in fact, dying. We're at a point right now where endless war is almost the rule. The American empire is flailing like a drunken elephant through the canebrake, trampling it on everything in its path, and also killing itself. So we have no choice if we want to conserve beautiful things, valuable things, a sustainable world for the future. We have no choice but to go in a different direction. Allowing ourselves to be bamboozled into voting solely against Trump isn't going to do it. That's what's led us to where we are now, the pass we're at now. And even when it comes to the environment, Biden's been really bad. And we've been through this. But whether it's the Willow Creek Project in Alaska, whether it's approving even more oil and gas permits than Trump did, producing more, and it's not even just approving the permits, but we're actually producing more oil and gas than ever before. The LNG plants on the Gulf Coast. Endless war in Ukraine. The proxy war there is terrible for the environment. You can't just, when you're arguing to vote, when you're saying to somebody, in my view, if you're saying to somebody you have to vote for A because B is so bad, that's not enough. You have to also show that A is significant, is better in ways that really matter. That's part of the process. Because if you're going to hand me, 2 sandwiches and say, you've got to eat the first sandwich because the second sandwich is full of moldy, tainted meat and rotten cheese. So you got to eat the second sandwich because the first is that bad. But what if the second sandwich is a turd sandwich? Right? I mean, then I'm going to say none of the above. Or what if the first sandwich is a turd sandwich and you're saying, look, it's a turd sandwich. You got to eat the second sandwich. You can't not eat the second sandwich because the first sandwich is a turd sandwich. I'm like, well, but the second sandwich is rotten meat. Tastes stinky cheese that went bad. So, no, none of the above. And the answer is, well, they're going to shove the turd. If you don't force yourself to swallow that tainted meat and rotten cheese sandwich, then later on, someone's going to shove the turd sandwich down your throat. I'm like, well, if that happens, it happens. But I'm not going to be part of be part of the decision process between 2 such awful choices. And that's where we are. And that's frankly exactly where we are right now. 2 really, really awful choices. All right, that's going to do it for me. Great talking to you. Have a great weekend. I will almost certainly not be back until Tuesday. And at that point, I will regale you with stories of my signature gathering in the Empire State.